So if I want to import something now, let's say the roof, you are kind of overwhelmed, of course, by the different icons that you can see up there. Just before we do that, a quick note is that you can see here in the documentation by McNeil that they have specific formats of the icons. The way that the icons are built up have a meaning. So you can see that the 2D data is referring to full shapes, let's say. And then if it's a three-dimensional geometry, you can see it's kind of a hexagon inside a hexagon, more or less. So you can really distinguish visually what those components refer to, more or less, right? Now, except of the Revit tab that we have here, there's also something interesting in the params tab, which also will now feature Revit primitive components. Primitive meaning that you can here just import, for instance, geometry. So if you want to import it, one way would be to just navigate to this Revit parameters inside the params, not inside the Revit main panel tab. And for instance, we want to go and just go to roof. You want to import a roof. Now you just go to this component, you right click it, and now you want to say set one roof. I want to reference one. Now usually if you do this, this will jump to Rhino, right? And then in Rhino you can reference something. It's different now here because you can see that it went away from Rhino and now it's back in Revit, and actually you need to do something in Revit, which is to then select something. Now, because it's a roof, it's very picky about the format that we can import. I cannot import a wall, but I can import this roof. So I do that. And now actually I have this geometry inside my Grasshopper canvas or setup editor. And here it's just telling me that this is a Revit roof, and it's telling me the type, the subcategory, so if you will. Also the metal panel roof, you can see that. Interestingly enough, another thing that now will happen is in Rhino, you can actually see this now. This roof is also visual in, or will be built up now in Rhino. And this means that you can access this command, right click again, and in Rhino Grasshopper, you can basically bake objects. So if you do not bake an object in Grasshopper, everything is kind of code-based. So it's actually numerical data that is just visualized in Rhino. But if you bake something, it actually becomes an object instance, which you can then model with, you can pull with in Rhino, for instance. And if you bake it, now you can see we actually have that geometry inside Rhino, and you can select that. But right now we want to keep editing in Grasshopper and build up the logic. So the next thing we need to do is extract this type format, extract it from Revit, and import it or transform it into a NURBS-based model so we can actually work with that in Grasshopper, because right now I can't really do anything with this object type. For instance, if I want to move this roof, which is easy by just getting a move and then saying in the Z location, I want to move this guy up by 10. Now I'm also assuming that you have a bit of understanding of Grasshopper. Otherwise, it's going to be double difficult. But if you have some understanding, this will obviously help. But we cannot transform it. Right now, it's null, the geometry. So we need to extract it into NURBS-based geometry. We can do that by going to Revit again. And then we have this Elements tab. So let me expand that. You have this Elements tab, right? There are a lot of features that you can have. The most simple one would be just element geometry. So you can just extract the geometry that is in there. So the element that I want to put in is my roof into elements. And now you will see we get actually, if I hover over geometry, a closed B-wrap. Now that has been transformed from Revit objects to NURBS objects or Rhino objects. Now it's a closed B-wrap. And I can do something with that closed B-wrap, right? So now I could actually move it, for instance, as simple as that. Just getting a move. I want to move it upwards. So I just take a Z unit vector and I want to define the length of the movement, which is 10 in this case. And if I move it, now you should see something. I need to increase, of course, my value because I am in millimeters right now. So if I move it now, it's going to be a bit more of a movement, right? So we can basically move it. And you will also see something funny happen inside Revit. And that is that we actually see this visualization of the roof from Grasshopper. Yeah? So if I would now just play around with this threshold of movement, you can actually see that the roof is going to be updated live. I can do a small animation if I will, and the roof is more or less flying off here. So this is a very interesting, very simple way to understand how we can actually interact with Rhino Grasshopper, modify geometry in real time. That's the whole idea. All right, but let's do something more exciting than just moving the geometry up. Now let's say we want to actually create something that is meaningful, like a PV system, solar panel system, and then importing that back to Revit. So let's see how we can do a small script inside Grasshopper, and then import that back into Revit.